Elsewhere, we get a look at some fearsome monster-looking guy, and he is told that it's nearly time to get to work. Later, Angelica participates in her own bout, and she absolutely destroys her opponent. Rick congratulates her on making it through the preliminaries, and she brags about winning 40 matches in a row. She also intends on winning her way through the block league, and Rick is eager to do his best too. Angelica still can't believe that he's going to try and do 40 bouts in 4 days because each venue only hosts one bout per day. This means that Rick will have to travel a long distance between preliminary fights, but Angelica doesn't think it's possible. Rick has to get to the Green Hill Arena in 10 minutes before his next bout, but Angelica gets annoyed because he wasn't listening. This arena is 30 km away, and he won't be able to get there in time even if he rode on a carriage. Rick calls her crazy for even suggesting that he ride on a slow carriage because he'd rather just run. Angelica says that that makes even less sense, but Rick shows that he's much faster than a carriage. Angelica would like to watch Rick's match, but there is no possible way she can make it in time. Rionette says she can make it happen, so she does some ultra-high-speed parkour. At the venue, we see that Rick already finished his bout, but Angelica was in no shape to watch. Rick won, but he still needs to work on his 8 secrets of going easy because he did too much damage. Rick heads to the next venue, so Angelica tries to avoid being dragged away again, but Rionette takes her away anyway. The three of them then go from arena to arena as Rick destroys several opponents. The 4 days pass, and Angelica is stunned because Rick actually managed to win the 40 matches he needed for the preliminaries. Next is the block league matches, and Angelica is relieved that she's not in the same block as Rick. Angelica was hoping to win the entire tournament, but she realizes now that it will be impossible with Rick around. To make things worse, Rionette explains that the S-rank Boston is participating as well. Angelica thinks about how no matter how things seem, she still can't let a certain man get away with something. Rionette wonders what she's talking about, but Angelica just changes the subject. She wonders where Rick is. Sarah explains that he's out on his daily 600 km run. Angelica isn't even surprised anymore by the crazy stuff Rick does, and she wonders how Rionette puts up with him. She's always with Rick, so Angelica teases her for people probably thinking that they are in love. Surprisingly, Rhett doesn't mind as she reveals that she has a deep affection for Rick. Some guy approaches them, so Angelica thinks he's trying to hit on them. Embarrassingly for her, the guy just needs their help with some work because he doesn't have enough staff. Rick finishes his run, and he is met by the chairman of the Western League's management committee. His name is Snape, and he's impressed by Rick for being the fastest qualifier in the preliminary league's history. The lizard man is told that Angelica isn't there, and Rick is surprised that he knows her. Snape is then the one to be surprised when Rick can tell that he's a retired pugilist, and Rick explains that he knew Snape was a fighter from their handshake. Snape reveals that he last fought 20 years ago when he won a little competition. The roar of the crowd was invigorating, but he retired when he was just 23 years old. That competition ended up being the first and last time he won anything. Snape doesn't compete anymore, but his company has entered someone in this year's competition. As Snape leaves, he tells Rick to say hello to Angelica for him, but he also wants him to warn her not to get too excited. Afterwards, Militia seems worried, and she reveals that Snape is from the Dragonaut Company. Snape makes himself appear like a gentleman, but there are rumors that he's connected to the underworld. He's the lead sponsor of this year's competition, and sponsors are given one slot for a competitor in the tournament. Just then, Rick overhears some guys talking about this year's rabbits. They fawn over a newcomer, and they call her a dark elf girl. The next day, we see the rabbits they are talking about as Angelica and Rionette have agreed to help the guy from earlier. The job of these bunnies is to build excitement for the tournament and to take bets. Rionette only agreed to do it because Angelica did, and Angelica says that she couldn't turn down someone asking for help with blood on their face. Some drunk guy makes all the rabbits uncomfortable, but he pays the price for getting too handsy with Angelica. Angelica gets really embarrassed when Rick arrives, and she explains that she's helping someone. Rick isn't enough how great Rionette looks, and Angelica becomes furious because he didn't react the same way to her. Elsewhere, the old gym leader reads about how Bronson was amazingly able to pass the preliminaries in just 2 days. What's even more incredible is that every one of his matches was decided by a single knockout blow. His accomplishment is getting all the attention, but Irwin also points out that Rick was able to make it through the Western League in just 4 days. Erwin isn't scared at all, though, and is just excited for this year's tournament. A look back shows when the gym owner first met Erwin. The owner was stunned to see that Erwin had just finished destroying a group of guys, and he called him by his nickname, which was the ravenous wolf of the slums. Erwin asked the old man to clean up his mess, but the old guy refused. He explained that he was there to scout Erwin and bring him back to Harriet. In Harriet, he would be able to obtain whatever he wanted by fighting and winning. That didn't seem very interesting to Erwin, so the owner explained that there are a lot of strong fighters there. This sounded like much more fun to him, so Erwin agreed to go. Erwin has that same expression on his face now, and he explained that he hasn't been this excited in some time. Back with Rick, Angelica is still upset that Rick didn't look at her a certain way. Rick changes the subject and reveals that Snape was looking for her. Angelica is clearly surprised, but she denies knowing anyone by that name. The next day, the Block League competition to decide the tournament participants begins. Only one entrant from each block can participate in the final tournament, so it will be really intense. Angelica faces off against some chick named Helen, but Rick can tell that Angelica doesn't seem like her usual self. Angelica is really tense, but she still manages to win. Rick is up next, and he uses one of his 8 secrets of going easy to defeat his opponent. Riomet is pleased to see that Rick is getting better at holding back, but Angelica thinks he's just as ridiculous as ever. The two then take turns winning fights until there are only 4 bouts left. Rick wants to discuss tactics because they have to win every fight, but Angelica says that she doesn't need it. She faces off against her next opponent, and Rick is impressed to see her combining her physical techniques with magic. However, Rick can tell that there is something dangerous about her opponent. This guy breaks through her magic, and he manages to land a devastating punch. Rick is concerned that she takes some serious damage, and it is announced that Angelica has been defeated. She fought hard to press her opponent, but the guy named Taylor destroyed her with a single blow. Angelica gets healed, but her pride is still injured. Rick says that she was impatient and stubborn while fighting, but this just gets her more upset. Rick keeps trying to tell her that she could have won if she was more focused, so he wonders if something is bothering her. Rick isn't even sure if he will be able to do anything, but he wants to try and help her. His kind words get Angelica to give in, and she reveals that Snape is her fiancé. She explains that a year ago her parents passed away in an accident. Her and her siblings took on the responsibilities of the household, but they were inexperienced and fell into great financial difficulties. Their evil grandfather stepped in and made a deal with Snape. Snape promised to provide them with a large sum of money, but he demanded that he be allowed to marry Angelica. Rick has a seriously delayed reaction to the news, and Angelica becomes furious by his lack of ability to process information. She goes on to explain that while trying to stop their marriage, she discovered that Snape had become the main sponsor for the tournament. She prepares to reveal what Snape's true intentions are, but they are interrupted by some commotion. They find that some dragon guy that Angelica is horrified of is causing a stir, and he's being confronted by the guy that easily defeated Angelica earlier. Taylor tries to stop the dragon man from hurting a woman, but the dragon tells him that he's getting too cocky. Angelica is then shocked when the beast knocks Taylor out with just one blow. A waitress tries to calm the monster down, but he just ends up bothering her as well. Angelica jumps in to stop him, but this just infuriates the guy. He attacks Angelica, but Rick shocks everyone by stepping in and telling the guy to calm down. Just then, Snape arrives and stops a dragon named Jeeth. He tells him to save it for the tournament, so Jeeth leaves. Snape apologizes to the bar owner and explains that Jeeth is his brother. There is no one strong enough to beat him, so he is troublesome to deal with when he gets violent. Snape checks on Angelica, and he's glad to hear that she is not hurt. Snape leaves, so Angelica explains the connection between herself, Snape, and the tournament. Snape promised to give her family a very large amount of money, but her investigation found that Snape's company doesn't have nearly enough to pay. This made her realize that Snape intends to earn the money through the tournament. Rick uses his brain to determine that Snape is going to use the sponsor slot to fix the outcome of the tournament, and Angelica confirms it. Because of this, Angelica decided to win the tournament so Snape couldn't uphold his end of the deal, and the engagement would be canceled. The problem is that Snape used his sponsor slot on Jeeth, and she knows that she can't beat him. Angelica is stunned, though, when Rick offers to train her, and she begins to fear for her own life.